This is kind of a crazy question. It's a little offbeat, but I'm just so wildly curious. You mentioned on another podcast that you went on that you've done like nearly every drug, like in the book.
Never smoked never did.
Was there a reason why you drew the line there?
Yeah, my mom made me go to rehab in 1995. Just to age myself even more. I was 20 years old in 1995. It was her condition for bailing me out of jail. They called her collect from jail where I was locked up for drunk driving. She said, I'm not bailing you out unless you go straight to rehab. And I didn't want to be in jail, so I agreed to go to rehab. And I mean, again, I was 20 years old. Like, I wasn't even legally allowed to have a drink. Like, it wasn't in the cards for me to be really serious about sobriety at that time. But what really I took away from the experience of being in that rehab was that I noticed, or I perceived, that in the rehab there was like a hierarchy of respect based on like how messed up you were. You know, like it was like, oh, like it's almost a badge of honor. Like, you know, that we would always be in like a big circle, you know, kind of sharing our feelings, like what, you know, was going. And on a daily basis, like one person would like sort of graduate, like they would leave the rehab and you know, another person would come in. And you know, the new person would come in and introduce themselves to the group and state what their drug of choice was, you know, like why they were in the rehab. And I remember there was just like, I just got this sense, like there's one guy walked in and it was like offensive to the group that this guy said his drug of choice was marijuana. You know, like people seem to be offended by that. Like, oh, dude, get out of here. You know, and, you know, like if the person's drug of choice was like it in some cases, it seemed like they would be like carried in, you know, like they were like read like, oh, the person just came in, like we'll see them in a couple of days, you know, they're gonna be like, you know, like I got a real sense of being like, whoa, like gnarly, you know, like don't mess with that. And the other thing was like, if people walked in and said their drug of choice was crack, it was just like, oh, I just got the sense that person's a write-off.
Wow.
Like people would describe like having, you know, addiction issues for decades. And then they took a hit, then they took their first hit of crack and lost everything like so fast, you know, like, and then again, it was 1995, like was still came out, I guess, in the late 1980s. So, you know, 1995 at that time, like was at its like peak destruction.
That's still interesting though that you drew the line there, because you also mentioned you'd go on these like 3-day benders where you'd just be on nitrous oxide like 24/7 to the point where you'd inhale like a full thing.
I would do my best to not inhale anything but nitrous oxide.
Exhale, and then the next one was another whole thing. So just depriving yourself of oxygen.
Yeah.
You said your lips would turn blue and you'd even go into states of psychosis. But even in that state of psychosis, you would draw the line.
Pretty much. Yeah.
That's just fascinating. Like it would just never, there's no world in which it would have happened.
Yeah. Like, I was just not.
So you had a boundary.
Yeah. Heroin is something because I read stories on Reddit. There was a user who wanted to try, not a drug user at all, but just wanted to try it just for the sake of being able to say that they've experienced what that was like. And they wrote this whole expose about, here's my plan, how I'm not going to get addicted, I live a clean life, I just want to be able to try it. And they ended up trying it, liking it enough to feel like, hey, it's actually not as bad as people say. I had a great experience with it. Let me keep doing it. kept doing it, became insanely addicted to it, and it completely ruined his life from one time trying it.
I
And
believe it.
It's mind blowing that there are substances that they're so powerful that just change the way your brain chemistry is worked.
The scariest thing that I heard about heroin was not even like the destruction that it does to you while you're on it and while you're addicted, but while you're in the recovery process and you're no longer taking heroin, the fact that you exist on a plane of kind of just black and white. Like nothing is as exciting or as joyful or as happiness inducing as when you were high on.
That sounds more like a Chris situation. Like with when you're withdrawing from it, like you're actually sick. There's not like, it's not simply a lack of joy.
Well, I was talking about like for the rest
years
of your life,
later, like
is
10
what I'm
years
saying.
later.
Like for the like till the day you die, like it's kind of just like
People are
like-
describing it as though it's like they've never had an experience that's even 10% of what their experience was like on that.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I would push back on that.
Okay.
The idea that the rest of your life is going to pale in comparison to the experience that you had. And to qualify that position, I believe that it's the addicts and alcoholics who achieve long-term sobriety who are the luckiest people, period. And granted, it's a very small percentage of alcoholics and addicts who do achieve long-term sobriety. I think that, you know, like in the big picture of the entire population, I think it's about 5% of alcoholics and addicts who actually like are long-term sobriety. Wow. But those 5%, man, very lucky, because any other disease that you can fall sick with, the best you can hope for is to get back to as healthy as you were before you got sick. But for us, when we treat our disease, we actually become better versions of ourselves than we ever were before. Like, I believe that strongly. And I believe, not only do I believe that strongly, I believe that I am evidence of that, because there, in my view, there is no younger version of myself who is a better version of myself than I am today. And I attribute that to having, you know, the accountability, the honesty, like like having that kind of like conditioned into me with this, you know, this adopting of a spiritual approach to life. You know, like it's a big ass deal, man. It's a big ass deal, and like so many people are worried, like, oh, but you know, I know I got a problem with drugs and alcohol, but if I get sober, life's gonna be boring. I can assure you that my life is not boring.